be a nice day tomorrow.
Mm-hmm.
54 degrees.
Good evening. Happy New Year, everyone. I would like to call this January 2nd, 2025 meeting of the Pinetop-Lakeside Town Council to order. We do have a quorum. I'd ask that you make sure your cell phones are silenced for our meeting tonight. I would like for you to stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance, and please remain standing. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Before I ask Keith to give the invocation tonight, I would ask you to join me in a moment of silence. We lost 3 former council members over the holidays, Jane Chavez, Norris Dodd, and Pat Place. And I would also like for us to remember all the victims of the New Orleans tragedy, as well as our former president, Jimmy Carter.
Our Father in heaven, we are very grateful for thy many blessings. We're thankful to be able to gather tonight as a council of the town of Pinetop-Lakeside. We're thankful for all thy blessings upon our community, and we pray humbly for the families of the 3 council members that have passed away in the last few weeks. The family of Jane Chavez and Norris Dodd and Pat Place. Grateful for their service to our community, and pray that thou bless and comfort their families at this time. We're thankful for the many blessings we have to be able to live here in the White Mountains, especially for this community. So many that pull together to help each other, and we pray that as we begin this new year, that we'll be able to continue to do those things that will be of benefit to our community. We invite thy Spirit to be with us in the decisions that we'll make, and we ask thee to bless us with moisture, where it is so badly needed, to preserve our forests and our homes and our lakes and our aquifers. And grateful we are to be able to live in this free land, and for all the blessings that have come to us through the sacrifice of so many. May we honor them in all that we do. We say this humbly in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Keith. Item B on our agenda is call to the public. This is a business meeting of the council. The town values and welcomes public input. Please address the council as a whole and not individual council members. Do not address staff or members of the audience. Council action on items brought up during call to the public is limited by the open meeting law. Council may direct staff to study the matter and reschedule for further consideration at a later date. Items on the agenda are not heard during call to the public, and individuals are limited to 3 minutes. Kenny Kale.
Mayor Irwin, town council members, town staff, and the public. Dogs are pack animals, and they learn through interaction. They enjoy other animals, and they need an opportunity to develop. A dog park can become an educational center for the owners, improving their relationships with their dogs, to share the responsibilities of cleaning up and training their dogs to remain calm, to provide within the community a common space for the discussion of ideas, a space where the town can demonstrate its character, display art, display its history, and to promote a pet-friendly community. The end result will define our community with all of its benefits as appealing to its constituents, travelers, destination visitors, and potential new citizens. Creating a dog park is a common activity for many local communities. They see a benefit in dog parks that reach beyond a place where dogs can relieve themselves. There's good and there's bad in dog parks, but we have a large amount of information from parks that have already been produced. While there are undoubtable benefits to dog parks, we can see there's limits and liabilities and potential problems with dog parks. If we choose to create a park, we can use this vast amount of information to make a better dog park. one that's more attractive, usable, and effective in meeting the town's goals. Local trainers can offer introductory lessons for owners. Owners can learn and share ideas about their dogs with other owners. I see the development of a dog park as an opportunity for the town council to show they're listening to their constituents. This issue was second in the town survey at 2023, yet little movement has happened since then. Dog park development can create future leaders in the town council through valuable developmental experiences, the exchange of ideas, and the creation of consensus. I applaud the council's attempts to provide more interaction with their constituents through hosting coffees and meets and greets. And it's hard to get involvement from the community, but it's necessary. Listening to the survey results is a big step. It's easier to find fault with irresponsible dog owners by finding them. This has cleaned our parks, but only changed the location where these irresponsible owners leave their messes. Thank you.
Thank you, Kenny. Appreciate your comments. Item C is the consent agenda. All items listed are considered routine matters and will be enacted by one motion of the council. Note there will be no separate discussion unless a member of council requests that an item or item be removed. Council members, however, may ask questions without removal of the item from the consent agenda, and items removed are considered in their normal sequence unless called out of sequence. We have 2 items on our consent agenda. Are there any questions from the council? Councilor Smith?
I move that we approve the consent agenda as presented.
Second.
Thank you. It's been moved and seconded to approve the consent agenda. All those in favor, please signify by raising your right hand. Thank you. That carries unanimously. Item D is business before the council. Public comment will be taken at the beginning of each agenda item after the subject has been announced by the mayor and explained by staff. Any citizen who wishes may speak one time for 5 minutes on each agenda item, either before or after council discussion. Questions from council members, however, may be directed to staff or a member of the public through the mayor at any time. Item D1 is a presentation of the Navajo and Apache Counties traffic study finding. I believe those should be Navajo and Apache Lane. Matt?
Thank you, Mayor and Council. I'm happy to be here tonight. This is a 135-page report. I'm going to try to condense it into 11 pages for you, so I'll do my best to preserve time, but if you want to read the whole thing, please feel free to stop by and get a copy from me. What we've had over the years is we've had an area of town that has been up for discussion about, is there crossover traffic and is there speeding and is the volumes too high? And that's from Navajo up through Claudia and into Yeager up to the stoplight at Safeway. And also down Apache across the Claudia into Yeager, and then also looking from Summer Haven back down. So that's what we're going to go over tonight, and that's what the presentation's about. So we'll get started. So the agenda, we're going to look at the purpose, the scope, and how we looked at the different areas and what we were trying to accomplish, the methods we used to accomplish this study, and then the maps, and then we'll go over the data. We've really condensed the data just because you don't need to see every page of every minute of every car that passed through a 24-hour period. So, the purpose was to address the residents' concern. We received a letter from the residents on, I think, Apache, and we've also received complaints over the years. I know I've received multiple complaints over the years. I've even done our own tube counts out there and completed speed studies out there in the past, and had the same results as we'll see tonight. The cut through was a big part, like we've already talked about, and not stopping at the posted stop sign. So the stop sign issues at Claudia and Navajo, and what happens is that corner was never really intended to be what it is, and so it should be a stop, but it's also a through street. And we have people that cut that corner thinking that it's not a through street. And so it kind of looks, as you drive up to it, doesn't look quite right. And that's caused us a lot of issues over the years. Okay, so the method, or the scope of the method is we use tube counters. Basically what these are is you lay these across the road and you space them out at a specific distance. And it tells you what type of vehicle is crossing, what their speed is. And it all does that by the timing between each time tire hits each tube, and that's how those work. We also used in this project was cameras. The reason we used cameras is we needed to look at each individual person and see where they were going. So we were looking at not just where they were going, but they had to make that destination in a certain amount of time. So it wasn't like they could go through there, drive through up Apache, and 45 minutes later come out on Jaeger. That was meaning that they were taking a stop somewhere along that road and doing something, stopping at their home, stopping at a friend's house, and then leaving. We were looking specifically through cut-through people. So we're looking at a timed amount on how long it took you to get from Apache to Jaeger. So we looked at that as our cut-through data. So that was the second method and scope that we were working on. The study area, as I mentioned, is basically from Safeway all the way to Woodland Lake Road. The intentions was that in each one of these areas, you'll see the roads that we talked about before, Apache and Navajo and Claudia. Those are all in the green up there. And then Summerhaven and Jaeger. Each one of those roads you can make a cross through to go from one side to the other. So the next slide shows what we were looking at and where we placed the tubes. So the red lines are where the tubes were placed. The cone-shaped areas were the cameras that were placed. And the letters are the areas of the cross-through that we were looking at. So on this slide right here, you can see from A to C, which would be from Navajo to Summerhaven, we were looking at a 1.5% cut-through. Trying to talk into here and look over here is kind of hard. I'm going to move this over a little bit. Let me move. All right, so A to D, which would be A to Jaeger, we're looking at 11.2. And we'll get into the numbers of how many cars that actually is here in a minute. And then B to C, which would be from Apache. And you can see the continue how we went through this and how we looked at every single one of them. Now down below in the darker color, that's on a Saturday, which we were looking at the higher peaks on the Saturday. Sunday was lower, so we used Saturday. But you can see overall, most of it is fairly reasonable. I would say that somewhere about 15% would be something that we would start to be worried about or concerned with. In this scenario, you probably could go all the way up to 20% because of the low volume on these roads. So this slide basically shows you what those numbers were. So from Apache from Navajo to Summerhaven, we were looking at 2 cars that went through. So that was the percentage of 1.5. Now everybody's concerned more with the Navajo to Jaeger, which was the 15 cars in a whole day. Apache to Jaeger, which was another big one, we were looking at 19 cars. So we're right about 12% on the Apache to Jaeger, and that was on a Thursday. That was when we had our highest peak was Thursday. So on the weekend, our biggest peak, which was interesting, I kind of thought that would go up a little bit on the weekend. It actually dropped, and it didn't drop by much, but the same characters, or same numbers. Just interesting that Summerhaven had 0 on the weekends. The summary of the volume. So on Monday was the peak for Apache Lane, which was 333 cars. On Navajo Lane, 351. On Thursday was the peak, and Sunday was the highest that week for the overall ADT for that week on all 3 of those, which I also found was interesting, the timing. Normally, when we do a traffic study, we typically see peak AM timing around 8 a.m., normal 7 o'clock go to school time. In this particular time, it was all around 10, which was the peak. That doesn't mean that there wasn't a lot of cars at that time. It just means the most was at 10 a.m. The other interesting thing is you typically see your peaks around quitting time, and that didn't follow that trend in that neighborhood, which was also interesting. You have 5:45, You have a 1245. It was kind of all over the place. It was very consistent. The numbers, if you dive deep into the numbers, it'll show you that they were only the peaks by 2 or 3 numbers. So I don't think that the peak data really does us any good because it's just a consistent timing all day long. It just so happened that at that specific time, we had 2 extra cars drive down Navajo or Apache. So I don't think that the peak data really matters in this specific study. Now, what I want to draw your attention to is things that we look at is we look at planning studies and we try to compare to other cities and states, right? We have to look at what the other data is and what's reasonable. So we looked at the Institute of Urban and Regional Planning Studies, which is a very common one that we'll use, and livability and the safety of residents' environment regarding the local street system. They're suggesting that a low traffic volume is below 500. And as you can see tonight, most of our volumes were, our highest volume for the week was 560 on Claudia, but you got to remember that's two-way traffic, right? So most of our volume is about 351 is about what you're seeing. You're just seeing that crossover. So somebody from the Apache or Navajo crossing over to Safeway or vice versa coming back the other way, and that crossover is a lot, but it's not cut through traffic. And that's, I want to be very clear on that. That's crossover traffic where somebody living in that subdivision did not come in through Yeager and exit out Navajo. It was somebody in the subdivision of Silverhaven that left and went out Apache or Navajo, which they should have all the right to do. Okay, the next slide. This is the traffic volume, which was very interesting that that they were almost identical. And you just don't see that very often. Usually when you do multiple roads, you see them all over the place. This was very, it just shows that they're both being used at about the same amount. So if you pick an Apache or Navajo, it's kind of hit or miss depending on the day. It's probably has nothing to do with which one's faster or anything like that. Oops. Traffic speeds, this is a big one. Traffic speeds is probably one of the most important reasons for a traffic study is we want to determine is it safe out there and is everybody, for the most part, obeying the speed limit. What we found was interesting. The average speed on Apache was 21.9 miles per hour. It's below the speed limit. Navajo was 23.1 and Claudia was 18 miles an hour. I think the reason it feels so bad, I went and drove it just to try to get my head wrapped around what's going on in there. And I've actually worked out there on Navajo before and Apache. And I think what's happening is that it's so narrow that it just feels to the bystanders or people walking on the road, it feels a lot faster than it really is. So the southbound traffic was 21.4, 21.2, and 17.8. So same thing. We're seeing very low, below average speeds. We did have a couple speeders, and we will work with the police to try to figure out exactly who they are. We will find them. So if you're speeding in this area, I highly suggest you stop. There was 1 or 2 people that were able to incredibly hit 50 miles an hour. And they were only one vehicle. So, and it happened at the same time on the same days. So when we get down in the data, we'll get that data over to the police department so they can figure out who that is, and we'll get that taken care of. So I can't control that. Changing the road system, I can't control just bad behavior on one person's part. So. Traffic speed, how you look at traffic speed is you based it on the 85 percentile. So 85% of the people is doing what? And in this situation, we saw no speed concern across the board. All of them were under 5. When we get above 5, 6 to 10, we start to look at what we can do to help mitigate narrow streets, things like that. And then over 11, we really want to look at how do we correct the bad behavior. It could be law enforcement, it could be road improvements or something of that nature. So in this case, we had absolutely no speeding or not enough to get us above the actual percentiles to make any changes. We also looked at the traffic class, which is cars, 2 axles, buses, 6 tires. That one we always get questions on. That's basically a truck with a small trailer. It just picks up weird in our system. So that was really low, 1%. And then 3 axle. Obviously a 3 axle is a semi, and the buses were, and then the motorcycles. So you can see overall it's mostly cars and 2 axle vehicles. So that could also be a longer Lowe's truck or a delivery van would fall in the 2 axles. So you could have some of the bigger ones. But overall, 69, 71, 71%, they all kind of stayed in the same, were regular cars. So that's typical, and that's what we expected to see. So on the conclusion, after going through all of this, the analysis indicated less than 15% of the total traffic cut through between Woodland Road and SR 260. I would not suggest that we do anything with this. I would say that we leave it. If over time it becomes more of a problem, we can look at it again, but I would probably wait some significant amount of time and see some significant behavior changes out there. Traffic volume, the collected traffic data demonstrates that existing volumes are reasonable and within the neighborhood. You're expected. We have 304, don't quote me on this, I think it was right in the 300 range of parcels out there. So it's matching up with the amount of people that live in that area. So I think the volumes are right on par with actually how many people live in that corridor. Speeds. The data shows that the 85 percentile speed is not at least 5 miles per hour over the posted speed limit. As I said before, you guys saw we weren't even close to getting over the speeds issue. And then the vehicle classification, there are no unusual traffic patterns there. And that's just because we just don't see 15, 20 semis running down through there. There's something we could do with that, but we can't do anything. So overall, I think that the most important piece to take away from this is that we're seeing the crossing traffic, but it's our own neighbors. And it makes it feel like there's a lot of people in that neighborhood crossing over, but when you figure in that there's 150 parcels or more on both sides, that's a lot of cars when you start to think that each house has maybe 2 cars, sometimes 3 with kids, or even more. And so when you start to see that crossover traffic, I think it's making the illusion that there is a lot more crossover traffic from SR 260 to Woodland. But I think that it was important to look at this and make sure that we understood what was truly going on in the neighborhood. Mayor, that's all I have. Do you have any questions?
Thank you, Matt. I appreciate your time. Council, any questions? Any questions?
Good job on that study, yeah. That was well done, Matt.
I see a couple of the individuals who signed. If you have a question, you need to come up to the podium if you don't mind, please. So everybody can hear you. Introduce yourself, please.
Yeah, my name is Anik Demel, and I'm the one who started the petition for Navajo and Apache lanes. And I'm very disappointed, I have to say, in the results of this study, because in my estimate, and I can speak for the 2 ladies that are my neighbors, it's a gross understatement. The fact that people weren't speeding that much during the time of the traffic survey may have something to do with the fact that prior to that, we had a strong police presence that caught actually several people, not stopping at the stop sign, and some other things like we had a radio at some point, and I think whoever was using it as a cross to get to Safeway or Ace got the message and started slowing down. Because in actuality, there's a lot more people than that speeds through that street. I see them every day. The other thing is, the gentleman mentioned anything less than 500 cars per day. Is that for a major avenue? Because for a small residential street like Navajo or Apache, it seems like a lot of vehicles, okay? That's a lot of cars in one day. I don't know how many people exactly live on Apache Lane. I think we're in the neighborhood of 50 or 55. 350 vehicles for a short street like that, that's a lot. So the fact that you're not going to do anything, you're recommending that they do anything, I don't think any of the constituents on Apache Lane are going to be happy with that. So that's my comment for now.
Thank you. I would just like to make one comment as I live in the neighborhood. I believe there are 185 parcels on Apache, Navajo, coming up Yeager to the end of Apache. That's just in Wonderland Acres. Then there are the homes in Summerhaven, and I don't have a number for that. So I'm guessing probably 225.
We're over 300. I just can't remember. I think it was like 348. We counted every individual parcel, and I don't know why. I had it written down somewhere, but I can't seem to find it.
That's okay.
So it was over 300 parcels in there. So it's right on numbers for what's actually being lived in there.
So I appreciate the time you took to do this, and I'm sure the neighbors will keep an eye out on it and come back to it if there are continued problems. And I have a question for Commander Wilkie. I know when we're all traveling on the highway, everybody, it's kind of, I guess, common practice that you can get away with less than 10 over. Is there a less tolerance when the speed limit is lower? Does that make sense?
Yes, Mayor. It usually goes by a percentage. It's always officer discretion. The Arizona law is that the speeds are reasonable and prudent. So the officers take that into consideration as far as the area, the posted speed limit, and everything else. And there's usually a tolerance and an officer discretion of a certain percentage that goes with any area. So if it's if it's an interstate highway, the margin's going to be a little larger. If it's a school zone, there's really zero margin. So.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Yes.
Appreciate that. Any other questions or comments? Councilor Phillips.
Matt, question. That equipment that you used to do that 7-day study for the vehicles, is that equipment that we own, or is that something that we have to get?
No, I hired United Civil to do this study. We used to have tubes, but the software in them goes bad so quickly that we've found over the years it's just more cost effective to bring in.
And just ballpark, what's it cost us to do it?
That costs $7,000.
$7,000.
Yeah, roughly. Yeah, these studies are not cheap and they're expensive, but they look at every piece of the data all the way down, and they go through it and make sure that we're not having any. The problem is once you've opened this can and you've started looking into a street or a subdivision like this, and you miss something that's a safety problem, then we're liable. So usually, typically, we look at every aspect just to make sure that we don't cause ourselves any problems down the road. And in this one, there's just nothing there to do with it. So I apologize.
Based on 7 days worth of data, correct?
And that's how you always do it. You do it 7 days, and you also capture the weekend.
Thank you.
Anything else for Matt? Okay, thank you. I think that was interesting information. We'll move on then to item D2, which is interviews and consideration of resolution.
One more one to speak.
Oh, I'm sorry. I apologize. Thank you, Councilor Phillips. Come on up. Jeff. Anyway.
I was just going to ask Matt if there's any consideration for future projects that may affect the numbers. Namely, there's a subdivision that was, I believe, approved by council on Woodland. And then was it a condominium that was approved? I haven't been through that area in quite some time.
So there are condos at the end of Navajo Lane that were approved probably 20 years ago?
Yeah.
20 years ago.
Yeah, but my question is, especially the subdivision, I don't remember how many homes and how densely populated that open field was right next to the res on, was that Mountain View and Woodland Lake, between the two roads. It's going to take them probably about, once it's completed and populated, a week or two to figure out a cut through to the Safeway will be right through your neighborhood.
I'm not really clear where you're talking about, Larry.
I think he's talking about the subdivision that is in Navajo County on the other side of the highway.
On Woodland Road.
Yeah, on the other side of Woodland Road.
They came before council. It was a couple Actually, I knew the lady. She ran a group home in Scottsdale.
So I think Councilor Heisler's correct. That is in Navajo County. And so we don't necessarily have any control over that. However,
Well, I understand you don't, but that again isn't my point. Let's say there's a couple hundred homes that go in however many acres there. You got 400 cars that may cut through Navajo or Apache. And it may affect the numbers that, Matt's presented.
Yeah, that's actually a better question for Jeremiah.
okay. Thank you, Jeremiah.
Plans from the county and Daniela Dakova and her husband that submitted that, David Cutis, and I do not believe that project's moving forward, but in the event it did, it was probably about 30 manufactured homes, and it's within 300 feet of the intersection at Woodland Road and 260, so it would actually be much faster for them just to go 260 than to drive back to the neighborhood and cut back through Yeager that way. I mean, not to say that some of them might decide to do that, but it'd certainly be easier to go the other way, and I don't know that project's moving forward. I haven't heard anything.
Yeah. It doesn't appear to be going anywhere. So
That has certainly been my experience. I travel from my house on this side of town over to that side of town on a regular basis. I've actually gone through the neighborhood and used it as a cut through, to be honest. And I found that it's not faster. It's faster to go around on the highway and take the left onto Woodland. And so I'm not saying it doesn't happen. I'm just saying for most of us that locals are here, that just doesn't make sense. It's a lot slower to go that direction.
I think your point is, if it gets built up, it might be wise to do another study if we get all those homes. Is that what you're saying? When it gets built up.
I don't know the answer to that. That's what I was asking.
I think maybe what helped clarify that is that whenever a new subdivision comes into town, we look at that. Like, we do modeling for all of this, and me and Jeremiah review all those analysis, and we make sure that we are increasing the traffic or the roads to what they need to be, and every subdivision does that. And like answering that correct? So that's how you handle that, and it's done at the point of the subdivision. That's why it's so important to go through the subdivision process and actually have developers come in and do that, because that's when we get the opportunity to actually have those type of conversations and work on those things. When we skip that process and we go the way that we have in the past, where we've had the what do you call it? Wildcat subdivisions. That really causes bigger problems than that. So I think that's the important part, is making sure that we get good developers to do good projects.
Well, it's a little bit off topic, but I think it's similar to what happened in Woodland Hills with the increased traffic there, impact at Woodland Lake Road and Highway 260. So traffic studies are really critical to any of these kind of projects. So anyway, thanks again, Matt. Anybody else? Council? Okay. We're going to move on then to item D2, which is interviews and consideration of resolutions numbers 251762 and 251763 for the purpose of appointing up to 2 candidates to fill vacant seats on the Pinetop-Lakeside Planning and Zoning Commission with terms ending July 23rd, 2026.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. As you said, we're here tonight to interview candidates. We're fortunate to have 3 candidates that applied for this position. All of the candidates reside within the town limits, which is great because that's all the seats we have available are within the town. We actually have the maximum amount, 3 that are already residing in the county, and so it was a requirement, and they meet that requirement. This is all because we have new council members, Councilor Furneaux and Councilor Turner, who were former commissioners. Thank you guys for your service again. And so those seats are open today, and so one of the things that we're looking to do here is looking back through the town code. Somewhere along the line, I can't say who is responsible, and I'm not here to point fingers, but somewhere along the line we got lost in the actual methodology wasn't followed, because every year we're supposed to have 2 commissioners terming, except on the 3rd year we'd have 3. And so somehow we got off that, but tonight we're going to correct that and also give whoever got the 1 seat that ended, I guess that was Harry's, it would have been over in 6-7 months, so it will give them another year in addition to that as well. So it's a good thing for multiple reasons that we're asking tonight to appoint them until when was the date on this one, Mackenzie? Next July? Not this July. July 26th, yeah. So without further ado, I would ask that you guys go ahead and start your interview process.
Okay, so I think we're going to do them one at a time and ask the other two candidates to go out in the lobby and sit. So we are going to start alphabetically with Richard Miller. So if Cathy and Jeff could go out, and we'll go back and send somebody out to get you when Mr. Miller's done.
Matt, would you make sure the lobby light's on in the visitor center?
Gotcha.
Yeah, thanks.
Okay.
Or Stacy's got it. Yeah, there she goes.
Okay, we'll give you just a moment to introduce yourselves. Tell us a little bit about yourself, and then we have a series of questions to ask you.
Thank you, Mayor and Irwin, and members of the town council here. First of all, my name is Rick Miller. I've been married 43 years, have a beautiful wife and 2 children and 7 grandchildren. I reside at 880 East Osprey Lane, which actually was the home of your former council member who just passed. I wasn't able to meet Mr. Dodd, but the realtor handled the transaction, but he had a lovely home, and we're blessed to be in his home, and I understand he was a great man, so sorry about the loss of him. I been in planning. I got a lot of questions, but I've been involved with planning all my whole career, 43 years in municipal government, beginning in Rapid City, South Dakota. I was there for 10 years, starting as a draftsman in a planning department, and worked my way up to planning director. Following that 10-year period, I went to the city of Casa Grande. I was hired as the development services director for that community and worked 20 years there, and retired in the Arizona State Retirement System, and couldn't leave because I was still pretty young, and decided that I wanted to pursue some additional planning experience, and went to work as a consulting planner, as a planning director for the city of Eloy in Pinal County, and worked there for a few years, and then was able to land a full-time position working for the city of Coolidge as their development services director. While working there in that capacity, the city manager, Bob Flatley, passed away, unfortunately, of a brain tumor. The mayor and council appointed me to be the city manager, and I ended my career in August of this last year, August of 2024, as a city manager, and getting bored. I love this profession. I've enjoyed working with mayors and councils and planning commissions for 43 years, and I think at this point would love to give back to the community that I reside in a capacity that maybe I can help with. Happy New Year, by the way. Hopefully your year is a good year and that things will go well for you.
Well, like I said, we have a series of questions, so we'll just start. I will start and move through the council. So what motivated you to pursue this position, and what do you hope to achieve during your tenure?
Well, like I said, I'm just a new resident here. I have owned property. I have a 10-acre property on Porter Mountain Road between Vernon and Sholo. I've owned since 2005. We have a small park model out there. It's surrounded by Forest Service. I love the forest and nature. We've enjoyed that property. Love coming up here to the Pinetop-Lakeside area. My wife and I love this community, and as far as pursuing this particular position, I understood that your 2 former planning commission members are elected to council. I saw that there were some vacancies. Felt that with my experience, I could come here and maybe offer some valuable insight in the planning process, which I believe heavily in. I think the planning process is critical to involve our citizens in the planning discussions, and to ensure that the policy of the mayor and council is carried out. I understand the planning commission's role, and I think it'd be great to participate as a team member in a commission. I'm very impressed by your staff that I've been able to read about and study up on. Your detailed study tonight on traffic was fascinating. I think they did a great job in presenting that. And of course, that's one of the critical roles of a commission member, is to look at those things when you're evaluating these subdivisions and any rezoning. And so that's, I guess, what really interested me in pursuing this.
Okay, thank you. Councilor Smith?
Yeah, Rich. When weighing outcomes of planning and zoning decisions, how do you prioritize competing interests such as residential, commercial, and environmental, and there could be other concerns?
That's a great question, Councilmember Smith. I've been involved with a lot of very interesting planning cases in my career, where there were competing interests. I'm a strong believer in private property rights. I think that it's important that we respect property rights of individuals. I think though proper planning and using proper planning principles, you can protect those competing interests through your planning staff as they're looking at these, if you have a commercial use adjacent to a residential use or a multifamily adjacent to single family, there are things you can do to mitigate those conflicts and try to, work out the details amongst the competing interests so that the outcome is the right decision for the community. I hope that answers your question.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Furneaux?
What are the most pressing zoning issues facing our community, and how would you address them?
The most pressing zoning issues? Well, like I said, I'm relatively new to the community. I've been looking at your general plan, looking at your zoning code, and talking briefly with your planning and your development director, Mr. Lloyd, today. One of the issues I see is potentially a pressing issue is the amount of Forest Service property that you have within your city limits that is federally owned. Some of that land is being exchanged, I think, into private ownership. I think that could be a pressing zoning matter. Federal land is not zoned. If it's sold off to a private party and the city hasn't zoned it properly, that could be a problem. And I see that as a pressing issue. It's with annexation. I've been involved with multiple annexations, and when a city annexes property, you have to the duty and responsibility to put an initial zoning on that property within a certain statutory time frame. Failure to do so renders a property without zoning. Every property must be zoned within your city limits, and if you have property that's not zoned, you need to address that problem. You have a strip commercial community here along the highway. Not a lot of industrial. I'm used to working in areas where we have a lot of economic development. Industrial base is growing and expanding, creating new jobs. I think we want to make sure that we preserve the commercial and try to do what we can to redevelop some of that and try to keep the jobs coming. But zoning, I think probably your Forest Service issue is a big issue. And I understand that there's from some of my conversations in community, you have a segment of the community that is anti-growth. That's not unfamiliar to me. I've worked in a lot of cities where you have one segment, may even be a minority, a very loud minority group of the community that expresses a very serious concern about leaving the community the way it is. I don't believe the community can stay the way it is forever. If you're looking for an anti-growth person, I'm not your candidate. I'm pro-growth. Responsible growth, smart growth, through proper planning, working closely with your planning staff, working with the community to iron out the disagreements and try to work with on compromise. And so I think that's pretty important.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. How would you balance the need for development with the need to preserve green spaces and historical landmarks? And you kind of touched on it already, but is there anything you'd like to add to that?
Balancing say it one more time.
Balancing the need for development or growth with the need to also preserve green spaces and historical landmarks.
I'm a strong believer in preserving historic landmarks. That's the fabric of your community. It's important. That's your heart. I believe in historic preservation. I've written historic preservation ordinances. I've worked with certified local governments and the Arizona Historic Preservation Commission to preserve unique and important historic projects. I don't think development should interfere or compromise your heritage and history unless that heritage and history has been significantly neglected to where there's no economic value in restoration. But I think it's important to preserve your heritage. I think open space is critical. I think one of the benefits of this area is your open space. I, this afternoon, spent time with my grandchildren walking your beautiful trail system by Woodland Park. I love the open space and the trails and the amenities that the gentleman tonight talked about a dog park. That's part of an open space, an active open space area. Need to preserve open space. I think you can, I've had a lot of discussion about density in your subdivisions. I worked with situations where people want the big lots, but sometimes you can have higher density and require the developer to preserve more open space as a condition. So you're really dealing with more public open space that the developer will provide in exchange for maybe some smaller lots that are clustered. So that allows you to preserve some of your open space through proper design.
Thank you. Councilor Phillips?
How would you ensure transparency and fairness in your decision-making processes regarding planning and zoning?
Well, I'm I think transparency is extremely important, and honesty. Integrity is paramount. I understand the conflict of interest. I understand open meeting law. I've been trained in those areas. The planning process is a public process. It needs to be transparent. We need to be fair with the people that have objections to the development. We need to be fair to those people that might support the development, because you're going to have competing interests on both sides, like you were talking about earlier. But I think what we have to do as commission members is to look at it's not complicated. If you look at the citizen-approved general plan, the land use policy of the council that was approved by the voters, and you adhere and stick to your guidelines, you're going to be, as a commission member, making decisions that are probably not popular from time to time. You don't want to use your own, we all have our own opinions, but my opinion will be what's in the best interest of the town of Pinetop and Lakeside in making those decisions, not a personal opinion.
Thank you. Councilor Heisler?
How would you handle feedback from community members with opposing viewpoints on a given issue?
At the meeting?
Yes.
Yeah, hopefully that's at the meeting and then not during, or I'd rather have the staff, your professional planning staff, deal with those neighbors on their questions. But during a meeting, if you have competing interests, people that are having a debate, obviously the decorum of your commission is important. The chairperson is going to be a critical factor in how that meeting is run. You can get a meeting out of hand very quickly if you don't have a strong chairman up there asking people to be respectful of each other and tolerant of one another. We can have disagreements, and at the end of the day, there's some people that are not going to be happy with the land use decision. Others are going to be elated. I think it's important that we respect and are respectful of each other and listen. I listen more than I think we can learn from opposing views as well.
Okay, anything else that we'd like to? I'd just like to add to that last question. It's not always in meetings, because in a small town, as you will learn as you live here longer, it's at the grocery store, at the bank, the post office. So it's not just in the meetings, but
I understand that can be a target, at an outside of the meeting, but you have to be respectful of the process. You want to make sure that I don't mind listening again, but not offering any real opinions until all sides are heard.
Okay. Well, thank you. If you'll just have a seat. Stacy, would you please invite Cathy to come in?
Should I go out? Are there other interviews?
No, you can stay now. Thank you. Thank you. Just kind of introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit about yourself, and then we have a series of questions that we want to ask you.
Okay, I'm Cathy Purvis. I've been a resident of Lakeside for about 6 years now. Born in Arizona, so I'm an Arizona native. Wanted to come and spent most of my career in the Chicago area, but so when I retired, I wanted to go back to the Southwest. And so we decided to stay in Pinetop-Lakeside, and it was really the people that got us to stay here. We were just going to use this as a, temporary location. And the area, love the town, love the community, and so I want to get more involved. I'm involved with tracks and the Humane Society, the Nature Center. I started getting more involved with the Woodland Lake Save Our Park initiative. So, and I thought, what the heck? I'll try getting more involved with the Planning and Zoning Commission, and have a voice in the community more.
And so what motivated you to pursue this position, and what do you expect to achieve during your tenure?
Just getting more involved with the community. Like I said, I love the community, and I figured that being a part of the commission, you have a voice to see some of the direction of how this town will grow in the future. I was looking at the general plan from 2015 and comparing it to 2001, and a lot of the things that we were talking about in 2000, we still haven't really transpired. So, and hopefully we will. I would imagine this town is very challenging in the sense of being around with all the U.S. Forest Service. You got the reservation. You got a lot of temporary people or part-timers that are not really as active as we should be into this town, and try to get more involved, get more people more involved, right? I mean, you need the community's involvement to make it grow and be successful.
Thank you. Councillor Smith?
Yeah, Kathy. When weighing the outcomes of planning and zoning decisions, how do you prioritize competing interests, such as residential, commercial, and environmental?
Oh, I really don't know. I mean, I'm not, in fact, I was trying to go to one of the meetings on planning and zoning once I started thinking about would be kind of nice to get more involved to see how all other commissioners evaluate some of the problems. But I would look at things, and I would imagine as a commission, there's discussion, there's this, and insight of all the other individuals. You look at the zoning regulations, and you make those decisions. I mean, I imagine it'd be very difficult sometimes, but you get the input of other people.
Thank you.
Councillor Furneaux?
Thank you. What are the most pressing zoning issues facing our community, and how would you address them?
Well, I would think, I really don't know, but what I see some of the buildings that are old and unoccupied, I don't know if there's a zoning regulations that these property owners are not following, but I would look at some of the buildings we have around 260, yeah, I don't know. And until you really, I guess, go to some of these meetings and understand what is the issue, we'll find out, right?
Yep.
Thank you. How would you balance the need for development and growth with the need to preserve our green spaces on our historical landmarks?
Well, that's, I think, an issue you guys have been having for a long time, for decades. It's that trying to make sure you have a growing community so it doesn't die, but you still want to keep the natural resources, the forest, the open spaces that people gravitate to Pinetop-Lakeside. I would look at areas that might not be so apparent as you come into town. When you come into town, you see it's all commercial and things with some green spots. I like to keep that still as green as possible and keep some of maybe start doing some of the developments in some of the other areas of the town. But yeah, I know one of the biggest concerns a lot of community residents have is we don't have a lot of shopping options. They really were talking about a big box, but looking at how we are now, our land, there's not a lot of opportunities for big buildings and big facilities and things. We really will need to rely on the smaller businesses and retail, things like that, until we look at getting some of these county locations into the town to do, get their support for annexation. Because I think this town, from what I know, we're kind of limited to what we can do to grow and succeed. We need more community people, more citizens to get more involved, to understand what the issues are.
Thank you. Councillor Phillips?
How would you ensure transparency and fairness in your decision-making processes regarding planning and zoning?
Well, I think, all that is pretty transparent because you record the meetings and such. So there's minutes. I think how the town does their planning and zoning is pretty well transparent from what I've seen, what I know, which is not enough. So.
Councilor Heisler?
How would you handle feedback from community members with opposing viewpoints on a given issue?
Well, I think education is the key, right? To try to make sure the citizens understand why the commissions has presented the situations to the council correctly. Through discussion, through talk, through community awareness.
Thank you, Kathy. Anything else? Okay, you can go ahead and have a seat. Stacy, would you please invite Jeff in? Jeff, if you could come up and just introduce yourself briefly, and then we have a series of questions we'd like to ask.
All right, very good. Mayor, council members, staff. My name is Jeff Stearns. I live here in Lakeside. Excuse me. I just moved up here this last year. Live with my fiance, Lisa, and I have one daughter who is a college student right now and enjoying it very much, and very pleased to be here.
Okay, thank you. So what motivated you to pursue this position, and what do you hope to achieve during your tenure?
Well, I think it's the opportunity to contribute. I have time. If you took a look at my resume, I've been retired for about 6 years now, and I don't care for the term retired. It's the opportunity where I get to spend time for myself now and for my community. And so I've done that through a series of endeavors. I lived in Chandler here for a good period of time. I got onto the board, the HOA there, to contribute to the community down there. That's relatively large, about 431 units, good size development. Joined the HOA up here. Also served with my daughter's high school on the Boosters Club, helping her out with sports endeavors. So when I have the time, I like the opportunity to give back. Plus, I like the opportunity to learn. I don't know much about zoning, planning, as it relates to a community, and I saw this as a great opportunity.
Thank you. Councilor Smith?
Yeah. When weighing the outcomes of planning and zoning decisions, how do you prioritize competing interests, such as residential, commercial, environmental, et cetera?
I think you have to take a balanced approach, and I think each situation is probably going to represent itself with a set of criteria that is different. I spent a lot of years in procurement, and one of the big things associated with procurement is you've got to identify your selection criteria for where you're going to come out. And those selection criteria vary depending upon the particular circumstance that you're looking at. So you have to weigh and you have to understand what are the mitigating factors associated with the particular endeavor that you're considering. And I think that's done on an individual basis and with the team. Obviously, if I am fortunate enough to be selected, I'll be on a team that has a vast amount of knowledge. I need to absorb a lot of knowledge, and I'm going to ask a lot of questions. I do ask a lot of questions. So I think it really comes down to understanding the factor for consideration and those other considerations that come into play for the final resolution.
Thank you, Jeff.
Councilor Furneaux?
Yes, thank you. What are the most pressing zoning issues facing our community, and how would you address them?
Wow. I guess I would answer that current state and future state. Current state, I think we've got an aged community in some respects, so those need to be taken into consideration. We need to understand what's appropriate for modification, when modification, balancing the needs of the community versus the needs of protecting the community, because I think planning and zoning represents the opportunity for constructive, organized development. And I think that's a fundamental underlying consideration. So that's current state. Future state, oh my goodness. I think that this community has so much potential. And I also believe that there are factors out there that are going to present even more of an enticing opportunity for individuals to live within this community. Technology. Technology is becoming such that you don't need to reside at a single location. So individuals more and more have the opportunity to choose that location that they're going to reside in and work from. That's going to place some stress, I think, on us, because this is highly desirable location. I think that mitigating factors such as what we saw with the pandemic, and I think that that was probably somewhat of an early test for us in Pinetop-Lakeside, because I think there were a good number of individuals that wanted to escape that urban area and get into a more rural area. And I think that that is something that is certainly going to be a factor in the future. So I think it's present day, and I think it's future consideration from a strategic planning standpoint.
Thank you.
How would you balance the need for development and growth with the need also to preserve green spaces and historical landmarks?
Really good question. Again, I think that we need to understand those areas longer term that need to be maintained from an environmental standpoint, from an ecological standpoint. And I think that from there, we have to have plans that allow for development, allow for the growth. But at the same time, we can't compromise those environmental centers. They're jewels. Once they're encroached upon, you can't come back. It's very difficult to come back. So I think that we have to place an emphasis on those particular areas. They need to be well defined. There needs to, in that definition, there needs to be an understanding by all why in fact they are defined as such. Because I think part of it is an education process for individuals, so as you look at development, you can convey why you are developing versus why you're preserving. It's about communication, it's about education.
Councillor Phillips?
How would you ensure transparency and fairness in your decision-making processes regarding planning and zoning?
From a personal standpoint?
How would you ensure transparency and fairness in your decision-making processes?
I've had just about every personality test through my career that you can imagine, and they all come out the same, and it's WYSIWYG. It's what you see is what you get. So I'm an open book. When I have a question, I ask it. I ask it in, I think, a professional, appropriate manner, because I'm looking for information, and I always build my information from foundation up. I always am able to look and identify those foundation criteria that need to be satisfied. So I'm going to ask questions. Everybody will see the questions. I will, in some cases, explain why I am asking the question that I am asking. I will work with the team to understand their perspective, their knowledge, pieces of the puzzle that need to be filled in that I can't fill in, and I will share openly where I am on a particular position. That's just who I am.
Thank you.
Councillor Heisler.
How would you handle feedback from community members with opposing viewpoints on a given issue?
Well, I'd welcome them. I spent my years developing and managing teams. Very successful, wonderful teams. I had great opportunities. In building those teams, I looked for individuals, I sought individuals that thought differently than I did, had different viewpoints. The first thing when I took over a team, I would always explain to them, I am what I designate as a prototype manager. I am opinionated. I have an opinion on just about everything. I will share that opinion. I'll share that vision. But my expectation is the individuals in that team will come back and critique that vision. Will massage it. Tell me where, in fact, I'm missing. Tell me what needs to be modified. And the individuals that had a high degree of success for working with me are those individuals that understand I may be a manager of a team, but I'm a member of the team. And I want that feedback. I want to understand. It's especially in the position that I'm in because, as I said, I'm a relative neophyte with respect to planning and zoning. So I need to listen. I need to understand. And I welcome that feedback, regardless of what it may be.
Thank you, Jeff. Before we move on, I would just like to, you go ahead and have a seat. I would like to thank all three of you for applying, for stepping out of your comfort zone maybe and putting yourself out there. We do appreciate it. And I'm really grateful that we have three very well qualified applicants for these two positions. We have the opportunity to go into executive session should the council feel we need to discuss this behind closed doors, or we can just handle it here in public. So what are your wishes? I will read this if somebody feels we need to go into executive session.
I'm ready to vote. I don't see a need for an executive session.
Okay. All right. I would invite Mackenzie to explain then how we're going to take the vote, because I don't think we need any session either.
Yeah, so you guys have ballots in front of you. If you would mark next to the two candidates that you want to vote for, I will collect the ballots, tally the results, and then read them aloud. And then, so whoever has the two with the highest votes will be appointed to the council, or to the planning authority.
Okay. So council, if you would all mark your ballots, please, and you'll come pick them up.
Okay, so Mayor Irwin voted for Richard Miller and Jeff Stearns. Councilmember Smith voted for Richard Miller and Cathy Purvis. Councilmember Furneaux voted for Richard Miller and Jeff Stearns. Councilmember Phillips voted for Richard Miller and Jeff Stearns. And then Councilmember Heisler voted for Richard Miller and Jeff Stearns. So Richard Miller and Jeff Stearns received the two highest votes.
Thank you. We do have two motions that we need to make. You'll see those. Appointment 1 is resolution number 25-1762. Councilor Heisler?
I move to approve resolution number 251762, appointing Richard Miller to serve on the Pinetop-Lakeside Planning and Zoning Commission with a term ending July 23rd, 2026.
I second that.
Thank you. We have a motion and a second. Is there further discussion? All those in favor, please signify by raising your right hand. Thank you. That carries unanimously. Appointment number 2, Councilor Heisler?
I move to approve resolution number 251763, appointing Jeff Stearns to serve on the Pinetop-Lakeside Planning and Zoning Commission with a term ending July 23rd, 2026.
Second the motion.
We have a motion and a second. Is further discussion? All those in favor, please signify by raising your right hand. Thank you. That carried unanimously. Gentlemen, thank you we look forward to working with you. Cathy, again, thank you for throwing your name in the hat. I appreciate that. And if you guys would get with Mackenzie and get your schedule, or Jeremiah, I'm not sure who would like to take on that responsibility. Getting them all up and going. I believe that concludes our business tonight, so this meeting is adjourned. Thank you.